Hello and welcome, Rangers. I'm Joe here with me, my co-host Stan.
Hello and greetings.
And today's video is going to be a different sort of Zordon Files video. We're going to have a still image rather than a moving set of images. And this is going to be a rather unedited video. So it's going to contain all of our raw thoughts on Psycho Red. And we're going to go through each of the Psycho Rangers over the course of several weeks, I think. Now, the Psycho Rangers first appear in Power Rangers in Space, and they are easily the high point in the season. The season had some great stuff in it, such as TJ, Cassie, and a lot else. I just mentioned those two because they're my favorite characters. That said, we've not yet touched upon a group of fan favorite villains. That is to say, Psycho Rangers. The Psycho Rangers were created by Astronema using part of the essence of Dark Spectre. They're obviously very psychotic and nutty. They're also very powerful, stronger, I think, in their second appearance than they are in their first. And they all have different, I don't want to say power levels, but grades of power and different levels of cunning and whatnot. And they easily overpower the Space Rangers almost immediately. And while I think that there was unfulfilled potential for them going in space, and that their episodes were it was way too short, the Psycho Ranger arc. I think it should have expanded to another couple of episodes. But Psycho Red, we're going to start with him because we're going to do it by color. He, weirdly enough, is not the strongest Psycho Ranger. The most powerful Psycho Ranger is Psycho Pink. Well, obviously. She's just a powerhouse. But then you have Psycho Yellow, who's the cleverest of them all, and the most Machiavellian. But what's fascinating is that Psycho Red is, in a lot of ways, an inversion of Jason from Mighty Morphin. And what I've noticed is that a lot of the Psycho Rangers are, in some ways, inversions of the original five. With Psycho Blue not being very smart and just a follower, which is a complete opposite of Billy, who was very individualistic and very intelligent, you have Pink, who's completely insecure and psychotically always enraged. Well, enraged to a psychotic level, which she does have some of Kimberly's flaws, but they're on such a expanded and steroid level that it's like, wow, Kim was never this bad. Psycho Yellow, rather than having a strong maternal streak towards the other Rangers, tends to manipulate and throw the other Psycho Rangers under the bus.
She's very petty.
But she's not as petty as Pink, but Yellow is like a complete inversion of Trini. Black, while he does tend to be more the strategic-minded one between him and Red, and often redirects Red in the right direction, he has no sense of humor and is utterly serious and even sadistic. He's just a total inversion of Zack in a lot of ways. But Psycho Red has Jason's temper without his goodness. He's what Jason could be if Jason ever lost track of himself. And I would argue that had Jason chosen the green powers over Tommy's life, Tommy would have become Psycho Red as a person. He would have gone down that dark path if he was not a broken man. He probably would have ended up more a broken man, but if not, he would have turned into a villain. And I know that's a weird outlook, but we have to bear in mind the line between hero and villain is often paper thin, but Jason always makes the right decision thanks to people like Zack and Tommy, because Jason deep down does care. But Psycho Red doesn't.
Jason, after making a mistake, does think about what he did, does reflect about it.
Yeah, it's just in the heat of the moment he doesn't think about it.
Yeah.
And then later he'll brood about it incessantly.
Psycho Red, however, has no
ability for self-reflection.
he's like the obsession with Goldar that Jason might have, but Jason is still willing to prefer to do the right thing over Goldar. Psycho Red, however,
Doesn't have that.
he's obsessed about
Destroying the Red Rangers. And I say Red Rangers because he was also pretty obsessed with destroying Leo. But the difference between Andros and Leo is that Leo is the more powerful ranger, and Leo is probably one of the top 3 greatest ranger swordsmen of all times. Only maybe Tommy ranks higher than him without even a second's hesitation on... I think everyone can say that without a second's hesitation. Sorry for tripping up over my words there. It's just that Tommy's the greatest. We know that. Leo's probably right behind him, because Leo performed some pretty impressive sword feats and power feats that puts him way above Andros. But it's the difference between Andros being a scout and Leo basically being a berserker.
and Psycho Red hasn't faced an opponent like Leo.
When he first encounters him in Lost Galaxy. Though Leo, in a lot of ways, has more in common with the likes of Jason, Rocky, and even TJ to an extent, in that he's mostly battle-focused. Andros has a collection of other skills and whatnot. In D&D terms, or even Star Wars Saga Edition terms, it's the difference between someone who's trained as a scoundrel and then a tech expert or something, and is more skill-focused in Andros's case, and even has various other skills and what abilities, versus Leo, who just focused entirely on combat. There's a very, very big difference between the two. Leo only has a small skill set, which he's really good at, but he's a fighter. He's a warrior. And he's not a scout. He's not a rogue. I don't know how good he would be as a scout. I mean, no offense, but you send him to spy on a group like the Machine Empire without getting caught. He might be able to do it for a bit, but I think he would eventually get caught because he'd get cocky or something, or charge in. Andros can spy on them for months, and no one will ever be the wiser.
And there's a side of Andros that isn't as impulsive.
No, Andros is very rational and level-headed. That's something I can't appreciate. It's just that Andros has a bit more of a self-centered side in some ways. And Psycho Red, though, also attacks... Now, he attacks Andros in space, not at a point when Andros is vulnerable or too distracted. He is a little over Astronema, but when is he not? He has a weird obsession with his sister, I'm just saying. Whereas Psycho Red mostly just blitzes out and goes, I'm going to crush him with brute freaking force. I will crush him. I will attack. There's no concept of defense. There's no concept of strategy. It's just muscle and attack. But this is a lot like a darker version of Jason. Now, arguably, Jason is not a great strategist. He's not a grand strategist or tactician. He doesn't lead the team intellectually in a way. He leaves those concerns to the likes of Zach, Tommy, and Billy, and even Kim. It's for them to come up with the strategies and tactics. He will lead them in battle.
If there's someone that's going to take the mortal blow and act as a shield for the others, it's going to be him.
Yeah. So
that's Jason.
Yeah. He will lead the team, but he's not the brains of the outfit. Which, hey, at times, this is similar to how Leo leads in some ways. Although, arguably, Leo does sometimes do some thinking, because he's more like Han Solo to, well, Jason. But on the other hand, Jason has never been someone to outright throw the life of a friend away, or to say, well, they outlived their usefulness, or who cares about them. That's Psycho Red to an extent, but he also doesn't take responsibility as a leader, and he says, this is your fault. When let's give Jason his credit. Does he ever end up doing that to any of his teammates? This is your fault, Billy. This is your fault, Tommy. This is your fault, Zach. This is your fault, Kim. This is your fault. No, he doesn't do that. Jason, like, it's very, very radically different. Actually, if anything, Jason does overtake responsibility in some ways when it comes to Tommy in particular. Not really the others, but it's Tommy that he's always going, it's my fault something happened to Tommy and whatnot. But it's because Jason regards himself, I think, as Tommy's elder brother in some ways. And you know what? Arguably, I would have liked it had they brought in David Trueheart and put Jason in the same episode where Jason maybe gets a little insecure about the bond with Tommy, if only because, before then, Jason was Tommy's big bro. And
there's an aspect of the burden of leadership that weighs on Jason.
Yeah.
Which Psycho Red eschews.
No, I only say the insecure episode idea because that would have helped develop Jason and push him along. And it would have been interesting to also to have the two older brothers of sorts of Tommy kind of bond over how annoying a little brother he is. And then he pranks them both at the end. I'm just saying, I think there was great chemistry that could have been had. But yeah, we're only bringing up Jason a lot in this because Psycho Red is inspired by the character and is a dark mirror. He doesn't. Now I say he's a dark mirror of Jason and not Rocky because Rocky is much more level-headed. He's very careful and cautious a lot of the time. And while he does have his own temper, see the movie, but Rocky is a joker, a class clown, and someone who fights rather more like, I guess, Kurama from Yu Yu Hakusho than Kuwabara to an extent. He doesn't just charge in. He typically goes in with a plan, or at least the intention of playing teammate to his friends like Adam, Aisha, Billy, or Tommy. He has to always be supporting his friends or going in with a plan. Whereas Psycho Red doesn't have any of these traits. He does often team up with his friends, but there's nothing supportive about it. And Psycho Red is nothing like Andros in personality. I don't see a single trait in common between the two, beyond the color. Arguably, Psycho Red in some ways has more in common with Leo. But that said, I still don't fully see it because Leo's a sly, sarcastic, fast-talking, cocky kid. Whereas Psycho Red, there's nothing sly. He's just brute force. And there's an underlying insecurity about Psycho Red in that he's very insecure about the others questioning his authority and afraid of losing control. And he's very afraid that they'll usurp him.
And he doesn't take advice.
No.
Even when some of the other Psycho Rangers are like, whoa, hold on. I have an idea.
Especially Psycho Yellow. She's always the one with an idea.
Psycho Yellow and sometimes Psycho Black.
Yeah.
And Psycho Red's like, no. Well, smack. I'm
going to go destroy the Red Ranger. And I can't help but think that it's a good thing he didn't end up against, Tommy, for example. Tommy would have crushed him, probably in the first encounter. But that's ultimately kind of the tragedy of the Psycho Ranger arc, is that you don't have the likes of, like, the 1995 movie team. You don't have Rangers like Kim or Tommy who could basically, no offense, but solo any one of these Psycho Rangers. And I do think, for example, Kimberly could solo Psycho Pink. And I do think Tommy could solo, Psycho Red or something. Or Rocky, Psycho Red or something. But I think that the problem is with Psycho Red is that he is ultimately as said, insecure in a similar way as Jason, but how he reacts to those insecurities is very different. Jason reacts with brooding and depression, and yes, sometimes even more anger. And Jason is incredibly emotionally dependent on Zach, for example, and is fearful a lot of the time for Tommy. Whereas Psycho Red does not have a protective streak of anyone, and his insecurities come out sideways and are always directed outwardly rather than inwardly. So they're two very, very different individuals. As far as the symbolism around red, a color of passion, Psycho Red definitely embodies that, but in the worst possible ways. He's obviously the shadow warrior archetype of the sadist, which I don't think it's too hard to see that. He's probably the second cruelest on the team. I'm tempted to say Pink might be the cruelest. Psycho Red is very, very cruel, very brutish, and very... really likes to enforce his authority on the other Psycho Rangers. But this is where he's different from Jason in this regard. Early on, Jason was genuinely leading the Power Rangers to an extent. I would argue Zach in some ways was co-leading early in season 1, and eventually you had kind of a Tommy Kimberly co-leadership thing that established itself and that remained for the rest of Mighty Morphin for the most part. But the thing is, Psycho Red... Okay, the difference is Jason knew in time that, yeah, I'm not really leading. And there was an acceptance. And because he was growing more concerned with his own... Well, deep down he was growing more concerned with his trauma over the green candle and whatnot. I'm not going to blame or judge. And ultimately although I don't think he said so, there was a relief that the torch of leadership had been passed to Tommy, officially. Psycho Red is leader in name only. The real leader of the team is Psycho Yellow, arguably. Which, the fact that it's Psycho Yellow and not Psycho Pink or Psycho Silver or Green, or even Psycho Black, is pretty interesting. And because Psycho Yellow is really the strategist and the manipulator on this team, which casts shades of the Wicked Stepmother in there, because the shadow of a true maternal archetype is a wicked stepmother. So Psycho Yellow really manipulates things to get what she wants. Often, if Psycho Red and Black don't immediately give in to what she wants, she kind of goes around them and keeps forcing the issue till they just agree, which that's very toxic. But all these Psycho Rangers are pretty toxic.
It's like Red is like Ninja Turtles, Raphael, with Raphael going crazy. If Raphael were to go crazy and evil.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, like it's really interesting to compare Psycho Red to other Red Rangers, because he's far worse than any of them. And in taking all the worst traits of a Red Ranger and taking it up to an 11, he's what they would be if they went foul. And just as Psycho Black is, Psycho Blue, Psycho Pink, Psycho Yellow, Psycho Red is, funny enough, he seems more like a henchman to the other Psycho Rangers.
That actually makes sense.
Yeah, but he thinks he's the leader because Red. Whereas, like I said, you look at Jason. Jason was like, okay, I'm the leader, which he had to step up to that role for a time. But then eventually, Tommy's leader. Oh, phew, good. Well, that's a load off my shoulders. Sure, That's my best buddy. He's a great leader. I love him. That's Jason. I'm not saying Jason's just by his very nature a yes man. I'm just saying, oh, if it's Tommy and Kim, I can support that. It's like, it's my best friend and his girlfriend. I support it. Whereas Psycho Red, if he knew the others were actually just using him as a figurehead, but he was just a henchman, and they're yes man, he'd fly into a region and try to get rid of them all. He would. He's got no loyalties. And yet, he's not smart enough to realize it. And let's be honest, of all the Red Rangers, Jason probably has average intellect. Like, he's not stupid. He's not genius IQ. Like, I would argue of the Red Rangers, maybe Tommy and TJ might be the smartest. But, no offense, but you have, like, Leo, you've got Carter to an extent. And, well, Carter might be a little above average, but you've... so bad example there. But you got Jason, Leo, who else? They're pretty average IQ guys. It's just Leo focused on cunning and slyness, whereas Jason focused in other ways. In some ways, more a bit of the wisdom of martial arts, I would argue. Which, hey, if you're going to focus your average IQ anywhere, that's a good place, because that means you're learning wisdom. You're basically becoming a younger Splinter, which maybe in 50 years, will Jason be like Splinter? That might be interesting. I could kind of see that. But on the other hand, you have the rather slower Red Rangers like Connor from Dino Thunder. He wasn't terribly bright. It's why him and Ethan come as a package. Ethan has above average IQ, but is socially a dunce. And him and Connor are basically welded at the hip in one of the best bromances in Power Ranger history. But Psycho Red has no brains. So he's a very big marked contrast to the other Red Rangers. Because a lot of them are pretty smart. Psycho Red's just not one of them. And there's another trait to Psycho Red that is a total marked contrast to the Red Rangers. All Red Rangers. Most Red Rangers do have a certain amount of chivalry and honor to them. Avec Rocky being a good example, and even Leo. Leo did not start with it, but learnt it. He learnt his chivalry from his brother in Kai, who fought darn hard, tooth and nail, to force it down his throat, because he was not a willing student on that front. I'm just saying. I really like Leo, but man, did he not want to learn chivalry and honor. It did not come naturally to him. Although, thankfully, once he learnt it, he held tight to it and held true to it. Tommy, he's probably the most honorable Ranger there's ever been. There's a reason we compare him to Trini. I'm just saying. As to TJ, dear heavens, he's chivalrous. There's a reason he's one of my favorite Rangers of all times. So, like, you look at any Red Ranger, typically they have honor in spades, or a concept of it.
They take their duties very seriously.
Psycho Red has no sense of duty and no concept of honor. He hates honor and regards it as something that a weakling clings to. Honor makes you dumb. But what's funny is that having no honor has made Psycho Red really, really stupid. Which I would argue that, weirdly, when you look at history, for example, the Bushi or the Knights, here's the funny thing. Chivalry and Bushido tended to elevate one's brains and make people more sophisticated and civilized in a way, and more prone to intellectual and artistic pursuits. A marked contrast to, well, societies with no concept of honor. Because the thing about honor is, well, it might seem like it narrows your thinking, but it hones it. You're not, like I've seen people say, well, it puts you in a box. No, it's more like a laser pointer. You're able to focus your attention on other things. For example, you might have, oh, well, how should you prepare for the day? Bushido, some versions of Bushido do get into that. How should you start your day? For example, Musashi might say, start your day with 1,000 sword swings in his Goren no Sho. So you start your day that way. Okay, you've done about 2 hours of sword swings. Good for you. Probably closer to an hour or so. You're now awake. You've worked up a sweat. Time to go eat. All right. But here's the thing about sword strokes. If you're thinking at all, because it's supposed to clear up your thinking, I've done some Iaido, you're going to be thinking about, for example, not hitting the ground with your sword because that could break it, but primarily you're going to be thinking about, let's say, oh, well, what am I going to do later? Or I have to do this. You can go over your schedule and whatnot. It frees you up to think about greater things, more important things. So if you can work it into your muscle memory, you don't have to think about it. And the thing about honor is that that's what it's, to an extent, about. It's about having self-discipline. And self-discipline is necessary for greater pursuits in life. Psycho Red has no honor, has no conception of self-discipline. He is so undisciplined and gluttonous in a way with what he wants that he just pursues it with a vengeance. And he really is just psycho. But his hatred for honor and self-discipline and regarding it as weak, what's funny is that it means that he can't think and he's trapped in a way in his stupidity. So he's a bit of a funny character, and he's one of the more pathetic Psycho Rangers in a way. And on the other hand, while I think that Psycho Pink, Yellow, and maybe Black are stronger than him, he does have some power to him. And he is used like a bull in a china shop. But we have to give him some credit. He was able to fight Leo and Andros teaming up, which the thing about such a team up is, I mean, no offense, but in combat, Leo's going to be doing the heavy lifting, while Andros is more there to occasionally alleviate the burden of Psycho Red's attention on Leo. And the reason I make this argument is Andros is a scout, as said before. And of all the Red Rangers, I would argue he's probably the weakest. Physically. He's the nerd. He's not supposed to be the frontline swordsman. He is probably the weakest swordsman. Like, he's not a fighter like Tommy, Leo, Rocky, or TJ, or even to an extent Connor is, or are. In a way, Psycho Red being posited against Andros was the worst possible scenario, because Andros is not equipped to fight someone like Jason. No, because if you were to pit Andros versus Jason would just curb stomp Andros.
Andros can be very clever in a battle, but there comes a time where someone might have so much brute force that cleverness
is useless. But the thing is, like I said, he's just not the best fighter of the Red Rangers. So to posit him against Psycho Red, that's a nightmare scenario for poor Andros, because it's literally Psycho Red bullying him. And that's the thing. Psycho Red just completely overpowers him, and any attempt at strategy or outfoxing Psycho Red just doesn't work. That's not me wanting to take pot shots at Andros. That's just me stating a fact. Andros had no ability to really fight this guy on his own. It was impossible for him because, well, Psycho Red really was too strong for him. That aside, Leo was strong enough to fend him off and clever enough to make sure brains were still useful against Psycho Red.
You had the fighter and a rogue.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my point is Andros had a touch of both in him and was fighter enough to, fend him off. long enough to come up with strategies. Andros does not have the physical might to fend him off at all. That said, if you were to posit Psycho Red against Jason, I think he might overpower Jason. Well, actually, I'm pretty sure he would. But on the other hand, this might sound weird, but if you even put Zach next to Jason or something, or Season 2 Billy or something, or Tommy, Psycho Red's not going to last because he might be able to overpower Jason, but if you got like Zach or Billy or Tommy to come up with strategies while also alleviating the pressure off of Jason, well, Psycho Red is done. Because Jason will have time to, power up his sword or power up, like the unified weapon of the Mighty Morphin Rangers and fire.
And Jason doesn't mind playing diversion.
Oh my gosh, he loves it.
If he has to make himself...
Take a shot every time he tries to play diversion and you'll end up dead from alcohol poisoning by the end of almost the 5th episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Because even if he ends up beaten, at least if the enemy's attention is on him, one of the other Rangers could, like Kim, could take the enemy out from a distance.
He's essentially always doing the Ryan Hardy thing from The Following. It's like, if you come near me, I'm going to snap your neck. Yeah, but then I'll shoot you. And his neck will be snapped. Yeah, but then I'm going to kill you. But his neck will be snapped. But you'll be through. And his neck will be snapped. That's Jason. It's like, nah, I'm going to cling to this one point. It's the principle, which I do find funny, but also it's kind of true about Jason. He's gonna aim for this, and no matter what, he's going to do that. It's why he really struggled over that whole not finishing Goldar thing off. It's because, he wanted to at least do that much. But on the other hand, if you were to put Psycho Red against Rocky, weirdly, I think Rocky would probably do about as well as Leo did, which is pretty darn well. I kind of think Rocky might do a little better to an extent. That said, Tommy in the first fight would solo and destroy Psycho Red, let's be honest. So that's not an issue. TJ, weirdly, I think TJ would have done better against Psycho Red than Psycho Blue. That's just my opinion. But TJ has both a lot of bronze, but primarily he's got a lot of brains. And almost no amount of physical might can subdue those brains. Then you have Leo, as mentioned. As to Connor, I only skip over the... as to Carter, real quick. Weirdly, I think Carter would actually do pretty well against Psycho Red. But Carter would just end up taking those two larger blasters from his team and just go point blank and shoot Psycho Red.
If he thinks, I'm not going to win, he doesn't mind blowing himself up just to take out that guy. Yeah, it's the principle of the matter.
Well, he basically did that like 2-3 times in Lightspeed Rescue. And I think one of his failed suicide bombings would take out Psycho Red. But arguably, in some ways, Carter is a mix of the knight and soldier archetypes. And, of course, you then have Connor. Connor, I think, would get overpowered to an extent. And there's also Psycho Red's obsessive side, which would drive Connor down a little, because Psycho Red would just overpower him and keep pummeling at him. On the other hand, where Psycho Red would have a problem is Kira and Trent would try to alleviate the pressure. And while the couple are alleviating the pressure, you'd have Ethan coming up with an idea, or more... and him and Kira coming up with an idea. Even Kira would join in to come up with an idea. And basically, they would take down Psycho Red. But Andros, in space, it's almost like child abuse. It's like, no, this is a nightmare scenario. Poor Andros, to an extent, really didn't deserve the punishment he got from Psycho Red. It's just, of that team... In some ways, Andros is the least equipped to be a warrior. He is a scout. He's the technical expert. he has a lot of skills the team cannot do without. They need Andros. Let's be honest. But the trouble is, Psycho Red's, well, the problem is you got Psycho Red who does nothing but battle versus someone whom, like I said, he's rather more like, I'm struggling to think of a good example, but he's one of the brains of the outfit. He's not the bronze.
He's like earlier Billy.
To an extent, but probably a lot better in a fight than early Billy was.
Yeah. And my point is that if we look at the blue metaphysical energy of intellect,
maybe Andros should have been the Blue Ranger.
Exactly, and
TJ maybe should have been the Red Ranger.
But
again.
that's not to dismiss Andros.
Oh yeah, he made useful contributions in the story, but like I said, I don't think he's well equipped to fight Psycho Red. And that has to do with, you need above average IQ, like way above, like TJ, Tommy levels or something, or at least the Carter Rocky levels, or you need a lot of bronze. And when I say a lot of bronze, I mean like the Leo levels or Tommy levels or something. But you need a balance. And well, Andros doesn't almost have either, to an extent. This is such a terrible matchup. Part of me kind of thinks that it would have been better had Psycho Red been against Carlos, who's just pure muscle, or Cassie, who's very much power-based and focused, or TJ. But Andros is at a severe disadvantage. But how he tries to compensate for it is really good. And there's a reason why him and Leo are able to make, I don't want to say short work of Psycho Red, but are able to take him down together, is because you've got both of them who are pretty clever guys, and Leo is basically carrying the team, the duo in a way, physically. So Andros has breathers and has the ability to go, okay, all right, I have an idea. And they're able to, and the fact that Andros and Leo get along fairly well also helps, so that Psycho Red was not equipped to fight this duo. He just wasn't. And he really should have tried picking them off one at a time, not going after both at the same time. That was just, but that's Psycho Red. He's not very bright.
He's just brute force.
Which, yeah, him versus Andros, not good for Andros, but you give Andros a single teammate, Psycho Red's beaten. So, like, yeah, heck, if you had Andros, like, even if Andros almost had Trini or even Connor, or at the beginning of season 1 Mighty Morphin, or beginning of Dino Thunder, I would argue Andros has a good chance. It's just he needs Psycho Red a little distracted, not for a simple moment, but just he needs the occasional moment to catch his breath, okay, I have an idea, let's try this or that. Psycho Red doesn't allow him that. So in that regard, Psycho Red has the right strategy, but it's because he doesn't have a strategy that Andros struggles, because, well, he's so strong, he makes strategy almost worthless. So it's not Andros's fault. Andros is actually fighting in a way that has served him well throughout In Space. It's just this is his first time encountering such a villain. Whereas, interestingly, you have other characters like Jason, Rocky, Tommy, Leo. They're used to villains fighting like that. Even TJ, to an extent. They're used to this. They fought Goldar, Trakina. Even Trakina's one trainer. I forget his name. But you see what I mean? Like, they're used to fighting characters who are just muscle. And so they've figured out how to beat them. Or just they eventually grew in power until they overpowered them. But ultimately, Psycho Red is... Yeah, we've been going on for about 40 minutes, and I can say he's not my favorite Psycho Ranger. Honestly, my favorite is probably Psycho Yellow. I really like Psycho Yellow.
I like the Psycho Rangers overall.
Yeah. And Psycho Pink I really like, just because she's so psychotic. But Psycho Red is... He is interesting as a character. He's just such a brute. But like I said, he's just a darker version of Jason up against Andross. So in a fight, if Jason was to fight Andross, I think we see the result to an extent in Psycho Red versus Andross. But if Jason was to fight, say, Andross and Leo teaming up, we see kind of the result there. And I know that's a weird supposition, but it's just... The Psycho Rangers are fascinating, and they are darker versions, archetypally, of the original 5. And yet, I'm going to be honest, to an extent, I don't think Jason would fall into half the traps Psycho Red does against the Space Rangers and even the Galaxy Rangers.
He's the kind of person, once shot,
maybe...
Once shot, twice shy.
Yeah, he might fall for the same trick once or twice, but by the third time, I'm not sure it'll work with Jason. And even if it goes to happen, you'll have Zach, Tommy, or Billy saying, "Whoa, wait, Jason, remember this time?" And Jason goes, "Oh, yeah, you tried to trick me. You know what? I'm going to go around your trap." And he actually does. In marked contrast to Psycho Red, whom, traps? You're meant to fall face first into those, right? I'm just saying. So, yeah. Even if he's a shadow version of Jason, he lacks some of Jason's brains. Like I said, Jason has pretty average IQ. Psycho Red is just the dumbest red-associated Power Ranger character of all times. And it makes the contrast between Psycho Red and Jason, or Psycho Red and Andross, or Psycho Red and Leo really cool. And even Psycho Red and TJ, really cool and fascinating to see. So we hope you enjoyed this long-winded rant and discussion and debate between us. I'm hoping next week we can continue with maybe another Psycho Ranger, maybe Psycho Black. I really want to discuss Psycho Black. And then I think the shortest will probably be Psycho Blue. He's the least... He contributes the least. Like, he's the least successful Ranger in a way. In a way, to an extent. And yet, he is interesting because he goes up against one of my favorites, TJ, who's just naturally awesome. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Leo taking down Drakena. And remember, Rangers, may the power protect you.